Ascesis is a Greek word that we can probably best translate today as training. It was actually used, St. Paul uses it, to describe the way an athlete trains for competition. And we don't often think of today of religious experience and our involvement in a religious organization as training ourselves, keeping fit, keeping constantly in the best condition. But this was how they saw spiritual practice and prayer, and also the importance of self-control, self-regulation, the importance of living with others. All of these are forms of ascesis and training. Community is also at the heart of this, as we saw in the theology of the mysticism of community and friendship in St. John and St. Paul. We live in a westernized culture which has overemphasized the importance of the individual. More and more people are living on their own in big cities. And the experience of community, however, is something that we also need and hunger for. That's part of the ascesis, part of the training and the self-disciplining that allows us to fulfill our human potential and to be conscious of filling it. For these Cappadocian fathers, it's important that we know what is happening, that we can make meaning as well as we can out of the experience of our lives as it unfolds. Another really important part, of course, of the psychological dimension of this journey is controlling those tendencies within us, which they called the passions, of greed or lust or anger and so on, that these are seeds within us that can form and reform very quickly. We don't eliminate them at any one moment, but we can diminish their influence. We can learn to control them, because if we can't control them, they will control us. So again, there's this very insightful awareness of the relationship between psychology and theology in these Cappadocian teachers. If we look at another concept like purity, for example, today when we use the word purity, I think in a Christian context, we almost immediately start thinking of sexual purity. And Christianity has become more and more identified with morality and, of course, with sexual morality in particular in recent generations. And what gets into the headlines is the arguments going on among Christians about sexual issues. But purity for these Cappadocian fathers is not primarily about morality. It's primarily an ontological experience or ontological state. That means it's to do with our very nature. That purity of heart, as Jesus calls it in the Beatitudes, is something that will shape our behavior, our thinking, our relationship with each other, but in itself it precedes the moral or the active. It's a contemplative and a mystical concept. And it is to do with finding our original innocence. John Main said that in meditation we recover our innocence. And some of these fathers spoke about even recovering our virginity. In other words, we're going back to the original source, to our factory, whatever it is. We reset to factory condition. We go back to our original nature. And the Cappadocians see purity as really being ourselves and learning to control, to discipline those aspects of ourselves, what St. Paul calls sin, to be able to control these, diminish them, and prayer, pure prayer, as they called it, or the prayer of the heart, contemplative prayer, is the primary ascesis, it's the primary work of the Christian.